Sometimes you need a larger bucket. Let's say you're going to be working in leaves or maybe in light snow. A bucket full is just not enough to move. Sometimes even mulch is like that. We've shown a light materials bucket from Redline Systems Inc. on this channel. You can still get that bucket. It's a wonderful bucket. It's built very lightweight, but it's much bigger than the standard bucket. Recommend that you take a look at that, but if you can't afford that and you still need a light materials bucket, check out what we're going to show you today. Let's get started. Yeah, this is the edge tamer version of a light materials bucket. It's just an add-on to your standard bucket. It requires the edge tamers. It'll fit both the cast edge tamer as well as the fabricated edge tamers, the older ones. That's what I'm using here. The 3-inch, 4-inch, doesn't matter. Assuming you already have the edge tamers, you can get all of this for $200 if you use code TTWT. You buy the wood locally. You buy the bucket extender, they call it, fits on here, from edgetamer.com. Let's see how easy it is to install. I'm going to start by mounting my edge tamers on the buckets. You've seen this done before. Typically, you don't really worry about where they're going to be placed, but in this case, I want to be a little more particular. And I want the tail of the edge tamer to be just under this bucket edge. I want to make sure it's pushed all the way back so that it's going to be solid. And make sure it's good and straight and tighten it down. You got to have the official edge tamers for this bucket extender, and that's because of the hole here. So the bucket extender comes with 2 of the actual extenders, and then it comes with 4 of these vertical pieces, 2 for each side. We'll show you those after a while. Mount the extenders like this. I think I'll put the head of the bolt on the inside. I'm going to leave those a little bit loose for now. We need to measure the outside of our bucket. I'm going to go to the widest point here, not the actual cutting edge, but the widest point of the vertical side. For my 53-inch bucket, that's 53 3/4. The instructions say to cut the 2x6 to 3 inches longer than this bucket width if we're going to be putting the plywood on the edges, which we're going to do. So we're going to cut ours 56 3/4. Now this 2x6 is going to go back like this, but we've got to notch out for the actual edge tamers. So let's measure for that. This will be different for each of you depending on how you have your edge tamers mounted. Mine's 47 inches. Okay, you got to do some fractional math. It's too bad we live in the English system where we have to do all this fractional math, but 56 3/4 total length. I need 47 out of the middle. Turns out that's 4 7/8 on each end that I'm going to have to cut out. Now I've got to measure the depth, how far out this edge tamer comes. It's probably 3 3/8, but I'm going to cut 3 1/2 here. And the reason is I want to make sure that I can jam this 2x6 right as hard as I can right into that cutting edge there. I think if I can have it actually touching pretty hard, that may bring a little bit more strength. We'll see how that goes. So I'm going to cut it 3 1/2 deep. I'm using the 3-inch edge tamers. So if I cut only a 3-inch notch out, that's just going to leave 1 7/8 on each end. And given that that's running with the grain of the wood, I don't think that's going to be helpful. So I'm just going to go ahead and take the whole corner off. That's the way they show it in the picture, and I think that's going to be fine. So I'm going to go 4 7/8 inward from the end, 3 1/2, and just cut a square corner out of it. I can cut this part way with my sliding miter saw, but I won't be able to finish the cut. And I for sure don't want to cut beyond my mark and be lazy there because I want every bit of this strength that I can have. Well, my board is warped a little bit. I should probably rip a little of that out of the middle. I'm going to be really close to the edge on that. It's too bad I didn't notice that. I would have went with this.
Yeah, it's warped too.
Yeah, I know, but it would have been warped a better approach for me. I think I'll do it like that, and then I'll pull the other end in. I've run into a little complication here because my 2x6 was bowed. Now, had I been smart, I would have checked that bow before I cut my notches, because as it is, I've got it put in so it's bowed out. Okay, I'm exaggerating here, but this is how it's bowed. And what that's doing is making these two holes, which are meant for this front board, they're just too far back, right? I couldn't get my 2x6 far enough back. Now, I could just go get a different 2x6, right? I bought this 2x6 less than 24 hours ago, and it was straight then. You know how it goes. It bowed overnight. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to drill a hole a little bit further out here. So I'm going to skip about a ½ inch and drill a hole a little bit further out here through the steel. Now, of course, my new hole is not square. It's a round hole. So what I'm going to do is put my carriage bolt in from the bottom and hope that I can get it to hold. Well, check that out. I forgot to cut the ends off. No big deal. I'll use my circular saw. The instructions say to use a 2x8 here. So a 2x8 and a 2x6. Naturally, I'm not very much of a rule follower, so I decided to use a 2x10. And I did that for a specific reason. When I watched the videos of the prototype of this in use, they were pushing it into leaves, and I thought, well, why don't we just taper this down a little bit so we can have a little bit of what I'm going to call a cutting edge. It's not going to cut, but it's at least going to be tapered such that material can be picked up in there a lot easier. So that's what I'm going to do. The question is, how thick do I need this to be safe? And I think probably a ½ inch right on the edge here is probably enough. So something like that. Now we need to go bother Rex. Yeah, it makes me happy.
Got off there a little bit.
Yeah, we got off there a little bit, but that'll be fine for what it's for.
Okay.
Boy, it's sharp as can be there, so we got a little. That's fine.
Now I can make that straight all the way if you want. We can cut it straight so you don't have that edge, because that'll break.
May need to go a little more. That'll be fine. So for the bulk of it here, it's perfect.
Yeah.
This may be a good test for us. We got a sharp spot down here on the end, and maybe over time we can show you just whether that gets butchered off or not. Well, our saw cut wasn't perfect, and yeah, it got too thin on this end. Even broke it on the way home. So you can tell that thin is not going to work. But for the most part, we're more blunt, right? So we've got a little bit of a taper here and more blunt. Hey, we're not perfect. Now, if done right, if I've got the length right, the ½ inch plywood should fit right in here. So I'm going to bring this one as far forward as I can, obviously getting them as far apart as you can get them is good, but since this is such a short piece, we want to make sure we get right in the middle of that. So I'll start with that one just so you can visualize 1/4 inch bit. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put that on upside down. We can put the carriage bolts in either way here. There's two different lengths of 1/4-inch carriage bolts. We want to use the longer ones here. The shorter ones will be for the plywood. I can go in from the bottom because we have the square holes on both ends. And where possible, I want the heads to be on the bottom just to make it smoother. They won't catch as bad. We couldn't really do that here, although I pondered doing that even on these two. I'm using a swivel socket here, but I think you can use a deep well socket and be fine. Yeah, a normal deep well socket will fit fine. Adding plywood to the sides is optional. You could be finished right here. And if you're using firewood, a lot of types of things that you might want to carry, this would be fine. In fact, some things might even be better, right? You could slide T-posts or something right in here. A lot of things could have a nice foundation here, but you still could fit them between here or between here. So you might not want the plywood. I'm going to add the plywood just to show what it looks like. I'm using the most primitive approach. If you look at the one on the edgetamer.com website, you will see that they've rounded it and made it fit and look really, really nice. I'm trying to use the most cost-effective and the simplest approach, well, other than my fancy cutting edge here. I bought a 2x4 piece of 1/2-inch plywood, the cheapest plywood I could buy. Obviously, it's a bit more cost-effective to buy it in the 4x8 sheets, but I'm illustrating that you don't need any more than 2 foot by 4 foot. I'm going to cut it right down the middle, 2 foot on each side. Okay, remember I put the bolt heads on the bottom? Well, I probably should have put them on the top for this reason here, or I could notch out for those nuts. You know what? I'm not going to do either one. This is not going to be a watertight or airtight bucket, so it really doesn't matter. How far forward do I want my piece? This is probably pretty good. I want to make sure it catches the back of this bucket at the top, even though there's a little gap there. Something like that should be fine. It's wet and soggy outside, not a good day to try to demonstrate this, and I don't have a perfect use for it right now anyway, but we'll try to find a spot to use this and put it to a good test later in the winter or in the spring. My gut tells me it's going to be useful, and yeah, I got plenty of gut. Pondering about how to store this, the two solutions that I see are to take it off with the edge tamers right here, 3/4 head bolt. That way you'd leave the edge tamer with the bucket extender all together. The second approach would be to take off this 5/16 bolt here with a 1/2-inch socket. We can reach under there really easily because of that area that we cut out. Either approach is going to work fine. If you really want to store this all flat, you're going to have to take out these carriage bolts over here, and then we could take the sides and lay them on there, and at that point the bucket extender wouldn't take up much space at all. Now you decide whether this is taking up a lot of space or not, because in my world, I'll stack stuff in there. So it really won't take up much space like that. But if I do think it's taking up too much space, I'll take out those 2 bolts on each end and fold these down. 3 pieces of lumber, a 6-foot 2x6, a 6-foot 2x8 or 2x10, and a 2x4 piece of plywood that we're going to cut in half. $19.55 at Menards after 11% rebate. That's with the 2x10 version. Be even cheaper without it. $180 for the bucket extender. Some of you are going to say, why don't you just go ahead and get a light materials bucket? Man, I agree. It's a very nice bucket. Redline Systems Inc. makes a very nice bucket, but it's also much more pricey than this. This is sturdy, okay? It'll get the job done with our little cutting edge here. I'm certain we can go under leaves, go under anything, mulch piles, whatever we want. I think this is going to be a wonderful solution. You could also choose treated lumber. Some of you have probably already commented that. Yeah, you could. I'm going to store mine inside. I don't think it's going to be a problem. And again, I was trying to show the least amount of investment to get the extra bucket space. Hope you guys have enjoyed this. I really like showing some simple, cost-effective solutions that may require a little bit of DIY, but this is just a fun project to do in your shop in the winter. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time on Tractor Time with Tim. His mercy extends to those who fear him from generation to generation.